Welcome to Lloyd's Futureset Business Leaders Discussions, when we take a step back just to take a bit of time out around the big topic of sustainability and change in the world in which we're in today. I can't believe who I'm sat here with, honestly. I'm with Rebeca Grynspan, who is the UN Secretary General for Trade and Development, with an agenda the like of which most of us can barely imagine. So an amazing background in diplomacy, amazing background in economics. But when we think of the UN and the issues that you're dealing with day in, day out, food, energy, war, trade and development, I don't think we've got enough time to begin to have the conversation I'd love to have with you.
No, thank you very much. And I'm thrilled to be here with you, John.
I think of the challenges in the world. What's front of mind for the UN at the moment? I mean, there are so many issues to think about.
Yeah, I think that from our perspective, from UN Trade and Development, there are like two sides that we need to reconcile. Yes? On the one hand, the good news of a soft landing for the global economy is good news, no doubt. But there are many economies that are having a crash landing. And so how to also care for them. The world is not even. And so we see on the other hand, a panorama of low growth. We are in a new low growth normal. And that's worrying for the developing countries because we need dynamic growth. We see also weak investment and trade. And without investment and trade, we cannot have, robust growth in the developing world. And that is the worrying part we are seeing. And probably also from our part, a real challenge on high debt. For many of the low-income countries that are in trouble after COVID. So those are the challenges we have to face. On the other hand, you have the technology, digitalization, AI, the energy transition, the green transition as huge opportunities for these countries at the same time. So how to put these two together for the opportunities to really overcome the challenges of inequality that we see in the world.
It's amazing, isn't it? We step back sometimes, and even wearing a Lloyd's hat, we trade in 200 countries around the world. It's incredible to think that 70 of those countries will have been through an election in the past 12 months and likely seen change of government. So there's so much happening, isn't there? But when we think about private business and government, is there a step back for us to think about how we integrate a bit better, how private enterprise can help some of what you're doing or some of what governments are doing? Is there more that we can do in that respect?
Oh, yes. First of all, we have to say that we cannot do it without the private sector. And at the same time, I don't think that the private sector can do it alone. They need the frameworks, they need good governance, and they need cooperation and multilateralism, especially, if we think about trade, if we think about international business. So we need a world that is able to support private investment and for private investment to be distributed more equitable around the world, because it's very concentrated in those that are already rich. So how do we do that the investment to be able to support also the countries that are weaker today, but could be strong tomorrow, in the benefit of everybody. And we really need the leadership of the private sector, and we need the private-public multilateralism, coming together to be able to include you, more effectively in the global decision making.
I think we're at a tipping point of understanding that, which I think is a good thing. So I think the private sector would turn around to government, in inverted commas, and say, please give us a medium-term plan that we can understand and buy into. Government's turning around to private sector and saying, well, you've got to be prepared to invest a little bit more broadly. So if I selfishly turn that into insurance, we think of the whole climate debate and how do we support the developing economies of the world and the emerging economies? What does that mean from a resilience point of view? I know that's been a huge topic of consideration for you. So where are we getting some of that right? But more importantly, where can we do more to help?
In a way, we need the private sector also to think about the long term
Yes.
How do we create incentives for the long term, not only for the short termism that is so abundant in this
Yes.
world? The other question will be, how do we go also for the prevention part of it, not only for the already impacts that we have to deal with? Because if we don't go for preventive action, for adaptation, for example, in many of these countries with respect to climate change, many of them or many of the sectors will be uninsurable for the future. The risk will be too high. So how do we deal with the risk, from an insurance point of view, if we don't prevent? So how to get the private sector into also prevention and also long term, so we can also understand better what you need, but you understand better, how the world needs, what you have to do for the world to go in the right direction.
Yeah, I think we've got to do a much better job of selling the value proposition of insurance. I think we would understand that, and how that can partner with some of the things you're doing. I'm going to ask you, it is a difficult question. So I mean, I grew up with a father who was in the armed forces for 38 years, and it's almost incomprehensible to think of war on land in Europe and war on land in the Middle East. But it would be interesting to get your take on what you're seeing in the Ukraine and what you're seeing in the Middle East, because that's so pertinent to the way in which we're thinking at the moment, and so front of mind for you at the UN.
Yeah, well, as you know, I have been involved in the Black Sea discussions, and to try to restore trade. When the war in Ukraine started, we were so worried. Food security, food insecurity was increasing so much. And because of the work we did, and maybe this is the value proposition from the multilateral perspective, nobody else could have done it, I think.
Yeah.
And we brought down the food price index of FAO 23%. Because, we were able to have the agreement on the Black Sea initiative. And 23%, John, just to give you a flavor of it, the World Bank says that every 1% increase in the price food index is 10 million people that will fall under the poverty line.
Wow.
1%. So 23% down is in a way to prevent 230 million people really going under the poverty line. So it was so important, and it was a systemic shock, yes? So we needed to restore trade. It was not only about humanitarian action, it was about preventive economics, yes, to be able to do the right thing for that not to happen, for the worst not to happen. And really the collaboration between governments, private sector, and the multilateral system worked. So we need to think that we can do this together, and that for future shocks, maybe we should have something that will trigger that collaboration in a more normal and automatic way.
I think the value of being able to convene is an asset that's underestimated, isn't it? So we do it in insurance. We've got an unusual convening capability, which we had the conversation with you. But on a UN level, your ability to have those conversations, even in periods of conflict, is remarkable. And I think should give us all some sort of peace of mind that even when things are difficult, conversations can still take place, recognizing that the challenges that are there for everybody. But this interconnected world we're in is staggering today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just taking a step back, I mean, if we look at financial services, I remember, I think it was COP26, where Mark Carney said that the financial services have $130 trillion under management. I think 30 of that sits with insurers, a little scarily. So, there seems to be enough money in the world to manage the pathways that we think we need to pursue. I mean, from your point of view, if you lent in on us in financial services, what should we be doing? What can we do more of? How can we help more than we're doing today?
It's also, we want the money to go to the right places and to the right sectors. For innovation, for, the what has to be discovered. Only 2% of total investment in renewable energy, 2% is going to Africa. So, that tells you all, So what do we have to do? So we are talking to the multilateral development banks because we really think that they have a central role to play in crowding in private investment to go to the right places. So I think that that's a reform and an action that we need from the international financial system, and that at the conversation with the private sector to try to make it right, to take the right decisions, to do the things that will really crowd in private investment without bailing out, everything, because risk is part of the market, of investment. But it has to be a reasonable risk, and we need the multilateral development banks to be able to do that for us.
So we've spoken a lot and thought a lot about the challenges that the world's facing and private and public sector, but there must be opportunity that's sat there. So how do you see the positive of this story?
Well, I think that the opportunities that the new digital technologies, the digital revolution, let me say, and also the green transition have enormous opportunities for the developing countries. They have the critical minerals for the energy transition and for the digital technologies. And they could benefit much more from, this revolution if they were able to add value, to participate better and more inclusively in the global value chains, yes. And I think that that is possible, and many of these countries are really ready. So what we need is to be able to have the flow of investment and the transfer of technology that they will need to make it happen. I am very optimistic. Let me say, I really think that we have what is needed to collectively face these challenges. We need the will, we need the leadership, and we need, as what we say, the 3 R's. We need to rethink, we need to reform, and we need to revive trust and hope in our future,
That's
in
fantastic.
our shared future.
We feel the same. We think the transition journey is incredibly exciting. Replacing infrastructure, creating new opportunity has got to be good economically for both developed nations and developing nations. So as insurers, I think we're in the same headspace, but it's good to hear that from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I could keep asking Rebecca questions, I think, for hours, but you've just heard in a few minutes just how busy this lady is. So I'm going to let you go, but thank you very much for your time today. It's been fascinating as ever talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. And thank you for your leadership. Thank you for all your support. And let me say that from the Secretary General point of view, and from his leadership, he was really the one that convened us together to be able to do what we did. So thank you to him, to multilateralism, and to the leadership of the private sector.
Thank you.